sometimes I'll upload a goofy lick or something to my Instagram or Facebook story, and I always get questions asking me, what is the scale I'm playing and how do you apply it in general context? So that inspired me today to make a little mini lesson on the octatonic scale, and I'm going to show you today how you can apply that over just standard dominant chords, and I'm going to give you a real good fingering. The nice thing about the octatonic scale is that it sits so nicely on the guitar. So you learn this one fingering that I'm going to give you, and in fact, it's symmetrical. So you can move that fingering all around the neck, and it's going to work everywhere. So you just learn one fingering, and you've got a sound you can apply to any dominant chord anytime one of those comes up, and you're searching for that kind of sound. If you want to talk about the theory behind it, it works over dominant chords because 4 of the notes in this scale are the 4 notes of a dominant chord. We'll touch on that later. I should say that the octatonic scale is known in 3 different ways. So first off, obviously the one that I use, octatonic, and I'll explain why I like that in a second. But generally jazz musicians refer to it as the diminished scale, and that's because it works over diminished chords. One of the other names people use is the half-whole scale, and that's generally reserved for classical musicians. They like to call it that because it's actually made up of half steps and whole steps, just in an alternating pattern. So, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, and then a whole step back to the root. And in fact, when you play a scale like this with so many close intervals like half steps, you end up with 8 notes per octave instead of 7. And that's why I like to call it the octatonic scale. So 8 notes per octave. If we look at it, it's going to be C. Let's just assume we're in the key of C, although there's really no key to it. Octatonic is another cool way of saying there's 8 tonic notes in this scale. So none of them really have any dominance over the other. They're all kind of equal, and depending on where you're using them, they could have different tension over the chord. But let's say, for the basis of the lesson, that we're in the key of C. We're always going to start and end on C. So starting on C, we're going to have a half step up to C sharp or D flat, as I have it written on the screen now. Then a whole step to E flat, half step to E natural, whole step to F sharp, half step to G, whole step to A natural, half step to B flat, and then a whole step back to C, the root. And if we analyze these notes over a dominant chord, it's easy to see why it works. First of all, like I said before, we have the 4 notes of the dominant chord in here, C, E, G, B flat, and that's why it'll work over pretty much any application of the dominant chord. But with these 8 notes in the scale, we also have 4 tension notes. We have 4 notes that are pretty resolute in that they're not trying to go anywhere, and then 4 notes that add a lot of tension to it. So if we look at it over the C7 chord, we're going to have the root, that's a safe note. Then we have a flat 9. Keep going, we have the sharp 9. Then we have the major 3rd, that's a safe note again. Then the sharp 11, there's another tension note. 5th, that's just the plain old 5th. And then the 13th, it's a pretty neutral sound, but it's outside of the dominant arpeggio, so I like to call that a color tone as well. And then B flat is just the safe dominant 7th, minor 7th, and then back to the root. And if you look at it on the guitar, it's going to lay out in a real nice fingering, which I'll put on the screen now. It's going to alternate between 1-3-4 and 1-2-4 all the way up. And there's going to be a little bit of sliding in there, and I've just done that to keep the fingering consistent. But if we look at it, we're going to start with our first finger on C on that first note, and then the next note we're going to play, we're going to slide up with that first finger. Then we're going to start this pattern. It's going to be 1-3-4, 1-2-4, and then we're going to slide down so we can continue the same pattern. So slide down a half step. You're going to end up on the 8th fret on the D string. This is your B flat note. This is the 7th. And we're going to start this pattern again. 1-3-4, 1-2-4, 1-3-4, 1-2-4. And you could add that next one in there too if you want. So if we take this fingering and we want to move it somewhere else in the neck, we're just going to work in minor thirds. So let's look at C. Let's assume our root note is C. If we go down a minor third from there, we're going to end up at A. That's a minor third away, and we can play the same fingering there too. And in fact, you end up with the same notes. If you go down a minor third from here again, do the same thing. And you get the same 8 notes. So it's just really easy to move around the neck, and you can move up with it too if you want to move a minor third. So that's just a very simple way of thinking about this scale and how you would apply it on a chord where you have the root on the 6th string. If you have a dominant chord with the root on the 5th string, you might have heard about tritone substitutions. So this is basically the concept where if you have, let's say, a C7, you can go a tritone away from that, and you can play the dominant chord, and it functions the same way. So we're going to take that concept, and we're going to apply that. So let's say, for instance, we have an E flat dominant chord. We're going to use the same scale as C, actually, for the reason that I mentioned earlier with the minor thirds. But we're going to say we have E flat 7. If you don't want to try and learn a fingering based off of a root note on the 5th string, just take the scale and the fingering that you already know and just assume the root is a tritone off. So this is your spot on the neck already, right here around the 6th fret. We're going to take that tritone note and then play the same fingering I just gave you. And you'll find that it works the same way. So there you go, just a quick little lesson on the octatonic scale. I hope it was made simple for you. If you have any questions, you can always leave some comments, and I'm usually pretty good at getting back to you. But anyway, if you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I do lessons like this pretty frequently, and hopefully something in the future is going to interest you as well. So thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.